Peace and welcome. Today we have video game artwork that looks oddly familiar. They will most likely be covers or box art, but we may stumble across an interesting flyer or advertisement. So with that out of the way, let's get this started. Our first one up today comes from a cover that we featured in a previous episode. Jim Power in Mutant Planet. We mentioned this character looks an awfully lot like Jean-Claude Van Damme. Then we received this comment from Rose Ward about the bottom right corner, and once we took a closer look, yep, that's definitely from RoboCop. From the deformity in his hand to the melted flesh and the way his clothes are torn up, I think it's safe to say this is no coincidence. On the Oddly scale, we rate this one an 8 out of 10. The character was basically melted from toxic waste. It kind of reminds me of the Toxic Avenger. And if you take a closer look at the cover on the left side, could that be him? Maybe you'll see this one again if we can find the exact frame or picture it's from. Our next up is another one from Jim Power Mutant Planet, but this time from the Japanese cover to the PC Engine CD. The main character this time does not look so much like Van Damme. However, he bears an uncanny resemblance to Arnold Schwarzenegger. And with a little searching, we found this cover for Raw Deal, the 1986 film. It's not as high on the Oddly scale as our last entry, but we have this a 6 out of 10. The arm placement is a little different, but it sure does look like Arnie. Jim Power was released for the PCE CD in 1993, about 7 years after Raw Deal, so it's definitely possible. The next entry on our list today comes from the European game titled Relics for the MSX. Released in 1986, this game saw 2 releases with 2 different covers. The first release in Japan looked like this, and it may or may not have any inspirations. However, when you look at the English release, you are met with this. If it doesn't look familiar, let's try mirroring the image. Now, if it still doesn't look familiar, you may not know about the cover of Invaders from Mars, because once you mirror that, it's almost an exact copy. What's even more incriminating, let me show you the cover of the soundtrack. This one doesn't even need to be mirrored. And if you increase the width to 104%, the fence lines up almost perfectly. The trees are in the same spot, the bushes are in the same spot, and even the beams of light are in the same spot. With all of that lining up so conveniently, this one gets a 10 out of 10 on the Oddly scale. This is not a coincidence, obviously, and the image was sampled or traced to make the Relics cover. Our lucky number 7 spot comes from the game Fire, released in 1990 for many different home computers. Now when we look at the cover, there's many things that could have been inspired from an outside source. However, what we will be looking at is over here, the man with the gun holding a hostage. That looks an awfully lot like Tom Berenger in the movie Platoon. Released in 1986, this movie has a scene where Tom Berenger, who plays Staff Sergeant Barnes, puts a gun to a girl's head. On the Oddly scale, that's about an 8 out of 10, perhaps a 9. It is an artist rendering, however they didn't really change that much. It still looks like Tom Berenger. I do find it funny that the artist put his name on the drawing right next to this. I know it's normal for an artist to do it, but did you really have to put it right next to the plagiarism? Also, in an interesting move, it's on the title screen as well, but now it looks like an adult male. Our number 6 spot is from the PC Engine, a game never released outside of Japan, Lady Sword: The 10 Captive Maidens. First released on July 13th of 1992, this game does have an unofficial English translation if you are wanting to try it out. This RPG may just take inspiration from Conan the Barbarian. This is another instance where we need to mirror the original image to end up with this. If we line up the images, it's almost an exact match. And this next part is pure speculation, but the girls laying around on the game cover, instead of her kneeling, could be inspired by the Conan movie poster. He's in a different position, but doesn't that kinda look familiar? I went into Photoshop and made a quick mock-up. I mirrored Conan and then cut him out and layered him over the top. When you compare them side by side, I think that's pretty close to the same. And I really wonder, could this be the inspiration behind the Lady Sword cover? Overall, we give the cover a 7 out of 10 on the Oddly scale. There's one character that has direct inspiration. And yes, there's only so many ways to hold a sword in the air, and it has been done by many other characters. But that's almost Conan's trademark stance. Our next up is from longtime friend Chris Hayes, and it's a submission from Command & Conquer. This is an example of an opposite Oddly entry where the game was released first. Most of our entries are games taking inspiration from movies or other sources. First released in 1995, I remember seeing this image everywhere, in advertisements, on the shelf, and in local game shops. Compare that one to the movie Jarhead: Law of Return from 2019. It could be a coincidence because that CNC cover was pretty popular and I automatically think of it when I see this, but it is hard to deny the fact they do look similar. The obvious part is the reflection in the goggles. It shows a scene of war while the rest of the image is in black and white for dramatic effect. We rate this one a 6 out of 10 on the Oddly scale. It's definitely similar. Unlucky number 4 comes from the MSX port of the arcade game Gradius 2 Gopher no Yabo. Released in 1989 by Konami, the original Japanese cover sure looks familiar. When you compare it to the cover for the 1984 movie Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, it starts to make sense. There's nothing that's exact like some of our previous entries. You have some light rays beaming off of their face, some spaceships flying around, and some stars because it's all in space. We will rate this one a 6 out of 10. It's not exact, but it's pretty close and hard to deny the inspiration. I can definitely see why someone would make the connection. Our bronze position today is held by Rick Dangerous. I'm sure 90% of you already know where this one is going. It's easy to see where the inspiration came from. You can compare it to almost anything Indiana Jones related. First of all, he has Indy's iconic hat. Then on top of that, he has the complete outfit with the same colors and everything. He even has something over his shoulder. At first you may think, but Indiana Jones didn't carry a gun, and I would say this guy may disagree. On our Oddly scale, we have this one a 7 out of 10. It's not exact, kind of like CNC and like Gradius. However, can we honestly say that's not a bootleg Indy? Our number 2 entry today comes from Challenger by Hudson Soft. Now Now there is a lot going on in this one, so let's take a good look and really understand it. We have blonde Indiana Jones going to save Princess Leia because she was captured by a red, purple, and blue Darth Vader from what could be the Temple of Doom. I know I can't be the only one to see this. Now in the game itself, the main character is an archaeologist named Challenger. She's a princess, and that's no big surprise really. But her name isn't Leia, she's Princess Maria. Overall, we put this one at a 5 out of 10. There's no single thing that's really exact, but there's a whole bunch of little things that kind of add up. Our top spot today comes from the game Ye Are Kung Fu Part 2. Yet another Konami game. Released for home computers in 1986, the cover sure bears a resemblance to Sailor Jupiter. The stance is exactly the same. However, that bears resemblance to Bruce Lee, and more specifically, the cover to Game of Death, the incomplete movie that was being filmed when Bruce Lee unexpectedly passed away. Filming took place in late 1972, well before Ye Are Kung Fu was even a thought. The same image can be found on the title screen, but they changed the character to have blonde hair. On the Oddly scale, we rate this one a 7 out of 10. It's not a coincidence, and Bruce Lee is quite well known. This isn't just the CNC cover that only gamers would know. He is a worldwide celebrity. So there you have the 4th box art episode. We have many more covers to go, so check back. Or better yet, hit the subscribe button. Last but never least, shout out to gold level patrons who help us out. Bearsona and Quantum X. We will have some big news here in about 2 months, and our patrons are a huge part of that announcement. Anyway, for now, I am ICC. Thanks for watching. Peace.